I tried to sacrifice my queen like 4 moves in a row. If you don't want to take it, I will shove it down your throat. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on this channel, Chess or Whatever. Today we will look at one of the best games Hikaru Nakamura ever played. By the way, I am sorry that there haven't been a video for like 3 months or something like that. I was very busy at the university, but now I have much more time and I will promise that there will be at least 1 video per week. So subscribe if you haven't, because there will be a lot of new chess content on this channel. As already stated, we will look at the game from Hikaru Nakamura. I think this is the first Hikaru game ever on this channel, and I thought we will start it strong. This game is probably the best game Hikaru Nakamura has ever played. Why do I say this? Well, because he says so himself.
Okay, you guys, so this of course is my game against Boris Gelfand. Probably I would say my greatest game that I've ever played historically.
Why is this such a good game? Well, not only is it a very educational game if you want to learn how to play the King's Indian defense, but also Hikaru sacrifices his queen like 5 moves or something in a row, so it's really an amazing game. Sit back and enjoy the show. The game was played against Boris Gelfand. Boris Gelfand isn't a big name today, but he actually fought against Vishy Anand in the World Championship 2012. So, of course, he lost, Vishy won this title, as we all know, but still a very strong player, which makes this game even more spectacular. And he starts with d4. He played d4, Nakamura responded with knight to f6. As said before, we have a King's Indian. They play all the classical King's Indian moves. This is all very standard stuff. We have this d6 move and castles. And here, Hikaru plays e5. Now, every chess YouTuber ever for the end of time will have to explain why this is not losing a pawn, because you can have this Zwischenzug here and the discovered attack, you win the pawn immediately back. This is a very equal position, but equal in a sense that white can't really fight for an advantage. Black has a very easy game here, so most people with white don't really go for this line. So instead, white did what most players nowadays do, they castle. And here, when I play this side of the King's Indian, and I play that quite a lot, I'm always already happy, because here you can play the move knight to c6, and usually from there on it goes into the very deep, theoretical, chaotic still King's Indian territory, and I love this. Of course, you might say, if you're a beginner, wait, why would I play the knight here? Doesn't it get kicked away right away? Yes, it does. But that's also what you want. You want to close the center in the King's Indian. This is very important, and you will see afterwards why. If you don't close the center in the King's Indian and you go on with the normal middle game plans, you will get obliterated. I think I have a video on this channel with Garry Kasparov playing against Jeroen Pickett, where Kasparov is white and Pickett plays black in a King's Indian, and he does not close the center and still tries to attack, and he just gets smashed on the board. Like, really, if I have the video, I will link it somewhere here. So you provoke white to close the center and move away the knight. And the knight wants to go here anyways to support the attack afterwards. This knight moves away. I will explain why in a second. And this knight moves back. This is a very standard maneuver in the King's Indian, because afterwards you want to play f5. And of course, you can't play f5 when the knight is here, because you can't go through a knight with a pawn. I hope you already knew that. And here, white also starts pushing pawns. And this is very standard in the King's Indian defense. Black will start pushing pawns on the king side, and will try to attack here. And white will start pushing pawns on the queen side. And whoever is first, succeeds first with this attack, wins. Usually, someone gets checkmated. There aren't a lot of draws in these lines. It's interesting that when you play black here, you want to ignore white for as long as possible. This whole queen side here, you basically ignore this for several moves. You only do something there if you really have to, really have to. And we see this with Nakamura. So white keeps pushing, black ignores it. And here white plays f3. f3, if you're white in the King's Indian, you really have to remember this move. Most of the time, you want your bishop here on e3 before you play f3 to put it afterwards on f2. Because now you see this diagonal is pretty weak, and in the future there could come a queen to this diagonal. So you want something to put in the hole? Don't... that sounds wrong. What would we say this? To fill the hole with? No, don't fill holes while playing chess. You do whatever, but no. I don't know how to say this. There's a hole that needs to be filled. Oh my god.
I'm so sorry, children.
Yeah, no, you just want your bishop on f2. I have to cut the other things out. You want your bishop on f2. So, the reason is, of course, black tries to undermine the center here from white, and white wants to close everything down and stabilize it. Black further closes the center. And this is usually what you want to do. You want to play f5, afterwards you want to play f4, and then, if possible, and it's mostly possible, you want to play g5. If you play f4, you basically also have to play g5. The h-pawn sometimes also wants to get pushed, sometimes not. There you have to look, but f5, f4, g5, they go like this. White keeps developing pieces, and here we have g5. Almost as if I looked at the game beforehand. White keeps pushing pawns, and I said it before, just ignore it. Just ignore it. Black also continues the attack. Here the bishop is coming into the game. We still ignore it, and we play the rook to f7. Rook to f7 is a very common idea in the King's Indian defense, especially if you have this attack here, this middle game. And the reason is, first of all, you want to guard c7, because at any point a knight might jump in and put a lot of pressure on this c7 pawn with implied pressure on the rook, and you really don't want this, so you guard this. Also, it gives the rook a lot more mobility. You can slide it over to g7 to line it up with the king, and what a lot of people don't realize, you also make room for your bishop to go to f8 to guard this pawn. This is sort of the bottom of the pawn chain, not really because this is the bottom, but oftentimes, as you see here, a lot of pressure is on this d6 pawn, and if it falls, the problem isn't that you're down a pawn, that would be alright. The problem is that your whole position crumbles from within, and we will have an example for that afterwards. So, rook to f7, if you play the King's Indian, really try to remember this move. Rook to e7, f7, very important. White continues the attack, and now black has to stop ignore it. Because there is way too much pressure now on this pawn. If black would ignore it and play something like h5, I take. And if you take back, I take with the knight. And again, the problem really isn't that you're down a pawn. Of course, that's also a problem. But the real problem is that this knight is a beast now. This bishop is way too strong. That's a passed pawn now. And those pieces just wait to go into the attack. Black will get obliterated here. Maybe not obliterated, but every super GM would easily win this with white. So you really don't want to have that strong of a knight there. So what Naka did is, he just took the pawn. Now, yes, you can take back with the bishop, and yes, this bishop is still very strong, but it's only one strong piece, and you're still like relatively evened out, except for a lot of strong pieces. So now, h5, we continue the attack. We have a5 and g4. Again, ignore. Don't even look at that side of the board. Of course, still look at that side of the board. But in general, yes, white also has a strong attack. And yes, maybe white will win this rook. A lot of the time, actually, you give up the rook voluntarily because you realize that, yes, it's bad to beat down a rook, but nobody cares if I checkmate the enemy king. And this is also what happens here. Yes, this looks scary as hell, and it is. You really have to be accurate here. But because you go for the king, you can be a little bit more adventurous. White keeps pushing, which is the right thing to do, and black ignores it. Ignore. Yeah, g3. And here we start to see that this is really not looking good. I mean, the king will probably be opened up now. It's very interesting. A lot of people probably think now, if you're a I'd say, intermediate chess player, maybe even slightly advanced, you will think, well, what about h3? h3 stops everything, doesn't it? I mean, this is all just super locked. What do you want to do? That's over. Now white is the only one with an attack. But wait. h3 you will see in a lot of intermediate and even higher intermediate games because they think they're fine now, but they aren't. Most people forget this bishop here, the light squared bishop. The light squared bishop has a pretty grim life in the King's Indian. Actually, most of the time it serves two purposes. Either at one point there will be a knight that jumps into e6 and then you want to chop it away with the bishop, or h3 will be played and then you sacrifice. Now you might say, well, Big Wolf, I just take. But queen to c8. How do you protect this pawn, and how do you protect the checkmate that follows afterwards? If you think, well, I just protected with the king, GG easy, you don't. Check! You have to go away with the king. Doesn't really matter where you go. This is just faster, the end is just near, and this as well. I mean, I take the pawn and I already marked it in. How do you stop that checkmate? Spoiler alert, you don't. It's impossible to stop the mate. You can try something like that, but I mean, I just take it, chop it away, and your king is still getting hunted. So Gelfand, being a world-class player, did not play h3, but just so you know what would happen if you play h3 here, he played a very clutch move. He played king to h1, which is so smart. It's so smart. Now this capture, if black would have played it, maybe he wouldn't have, does not come with a check. And if you play it now, I don't care about it. I have what's called an umbrella pawn now. The king is shielded behind this pawn. How do you continue the attack here? I mean, okay, you could go like maybe queen up, and then? Yeah, you could go with the knight here, but what's the whole point? You can't break through anymore, and white, again, is the only one with an attack. So you really have to be very, very accurate here and not take this. And of course, Nakamura saw this and did not take, but went bishop to f8. Bishop to f8 has multiple purposes. First of all, as I said before, rook to f7 with the idea to go rook g7. This is now a possibility, because if I take then maybe there are thoughts with the rook, huh? Also, this bishop is very, very strong. My bishop is doing absolutely nothing here, so I try to trade it off. We have d6 and a takes b6. Very interesting move. If you just take back with the pawn, I take here. You basically have to take back with the queen. There's no other way to take back. And then I can take this pawn. And now white's attack would be completely gone and black is up a pawn. So black is just better here. Now white saw this and did not take back. He instead retreated the bishop. Very good move. White realized that, yes, I have an attack, but again, it's irrelevant if I win a rook and a bishop if I get checkmated. So you have to defend your king first, even if you think that your attack will succeed. We have the knight coming out, and Gelfand plays rook to e1. Rook to e1 is a weird looking move. It just looks like wasting a move. I mean, why would you do this? I will go into this afterwards because I think it makes way more sense now. It makes way more sense then. But just let me say, rook to e1 is one of the only moves that still holds the position and survives. Almost all of the other moves lose instantly. Because Nakamura now is done developing, he's done with all the shenanigans, he takes on g2. Here you absolutely have to take the knight. Gelfand did not take the knight. He took on c7. Now, why do you have to take the knight, and why didn't he do it? This is pretty complicated. If you take it, the position is equal. But it's really difficult to defend. I play rook to g7. You have to take this pawn, because if you don't take the pawn, if you just waste the move, I move up my queen, and this checkmating idea is very difficult to stop. It's impossible to stop. No matter what you do, there's check. and mate to follow. You can't do anything against it. So after this, you have to take this pawn to stop the queen from sliding up, but it's still not over. I take with check. You have to take with the king, and after something like this, sacrificing another piece, which is a clearance sacrifice to get the queen in, this is really not looking good. I mean, the computer still finds a way to survive for white and says the best thing black actually has is a perpetual check here. But if you just look at this visually, two connected passed pawns on the 6th rank, this active queen, active rook, and it's really not looking good. And even if you give like this tuition check, I just put in the best computer move so you can see what it could look like. You have this perpetual check here, so this is the best white could hope for, and still like, oh, not looking good. So Gelfand did not take the knight, but turns out you have to take the knight, otherwise you're completely lost. He did not take the knight, he took on c7 instead, saying, well, if we trade off queens, my rook gets pretty active, just to show you, like, oh no, of course I take this rook, my rook gets active, I have this pawn here, okay, it falls, but we trade some stuff off, this should be fine. This should be fine for white, and he's actually correct, it is fine for white. The problem is, black does not have to exchange queens. And here is the start of a beautiful, savage sequence that Nakamura shows us. And it starts with just letting the queen hang. He takes the rook there, and I'm not sure if Gelfand missed this maybe, because this is something he could miss, or if he calculated it and just decided it's still the best move. Because it's so funny. You can win 18 points of material in one move here. Because your opponent loses 9 and you promote to a queen, which makes you gain 9, so you gain 18 points of material. You can't even take back the white queen, but it doesn't matter because black to move and checkmate in 1. I hope you saw it. It's pretty spottable because it's the only check on the board. Pawn to g2, protected by the knight, checkmate. Now Gelfand saw this. Gelfand did not take the queen, but maybe he missed it before. So of course he took the knight first to stop the checkmate, but Naka isn't over. He still plays the move with check. The king has to take, and now rook to g7 check. And this is also a good example why at one point you have to learn opening theory. You might say, what are you talking about? We're almost in an endgame, you're talking about opening theory, what the hell? Hear me out. Remember when he played rook to g7? Rook to g7 made absolutely no sense back then. But because we know in the middle games how those middle games play out and where a rook would be nice, we then know to play something like rook to g7. So, of course, if you're like, I don't know, 1000 on chess.com, you don't have to know any opening theory, just play out your pieces, put something in the center and castle. That's totally fine. But at one point you need to know these ideas. Because yes, in this position, if the rook would still be here, everyone would say, oh, rook to g7 would be great, but it's illegal. And before, no one thought that actually rook to c7 would do anything. So rook to g7, king moves out of the way, and we have bishop to g3. Do you realize, by the way, queen still hanging? I mean, okay, it's check, you have to move. Queen still hanging. Still, you can still just take the queen. But the problem is, there's the same checkmating pattern with different pieces. Yeah, bishop to g2, checkmate, protected by the rook. Isn't it funny? It's the exact same checkmate, but before you had it with a knight and a pawn, and now you have it with a bishop and a rook. I love this position, it's so amazing. So, of course, Gelfand again did not take the queen, and here it is. Bishop to f1. Now, Gelfand did not see this exact position, but he knew that bishop to f1 would be important. Why do we know this? Let's rewind a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I say let's rewind a lot. Do you remember that I told you that this move will be the only one that holds on? It's because it enables bishop to f1. Because if you don't play that move here, we already have the same checkmating pattern as before. Let's say I waste a move, which is actually only half wasted. I can already go here, threatening mate in 1, and if you take, it's mate in 1 again. It's the same idea. And if this rook is here, I can't play the bishop there. I mean, yeah, you could go with the rook here, but just take the rook. So all the way back here, he realized that bishop f1 is an incredibly important defensive resource. Defensive resource. And he played rook to e1 to make space for the bishop. And all these moves later, it proved to be correct, because bishop to f1 is the only move that stops mate without giving up a queen. So bishop to f1, but Naka's not done yet. Naka said, well, I tried to sacrifice my queen like 4 moves in a row. If you don't want to take it, I will shove it down your throat. Queen to d3. This is something, if I wouldn't know better, I would say Naka is just trolling. Now, again, if you're wondering, but I think all of you got it by now, if you take the queen, that's checkmate again. And here's the thing, here's the fascinating thing. If you and I would play this move, we would sit there and think, oh, I'm so smart, this is such a cool trap, if you take the queen, I checkmate you. And it would be a horrible move if you don't take the queen. This is still the best move, because it also attacks this knight. Now, the knight takes the pawn, which by the way is the only move that doesn't lose on the spot, because this pawn is also attacked. Again, if you waste a move, I do check. You have to move in between, and now I can actually choose how I want to take. Even if you do something like this, I still do the same thing, and after check, yes, you can take with the rook, but I checkmate you that way. The only move that works is to take this pawn and guarding this pawn and the check that comes with it. The only problem is, well, black takes the bishop. Queen has to take, and now no one is defending the horsey. So black takes, and good luck protecting this knight. It's very difficult to find a safe spot for the knight, and that's why white gave it up, and black takes the knight, and if we count material now, black is up 7 points of material, given white wins some of it back, because now you actually can promote. Black takes it back, white takes, but the dust settles, and if we count material, we both have a rook, we both have a bishop and a queen, and black just has this extra knight. And all the assets from white are gone. Like, black moved back to attack the rook, you have the rook to move the rook, of course. Now I take your pawn, and then I have two connected passed pawns. You have absolutely nothing, and your king is still pretty loose. So it was on this move that white resigned. So Naka played an incredible, theoretical, beautiful middle game, tried to sacrifice his queen 5-6 times, I lost count, and won a piece, and white had to sacrifice the game, all against one of the best players at that time. If that's not amazing, I don't know what is. Oh, and of course, like and share and subscribe and all the other stuff.